The word discipline does not mean punishment. We've confused the terms, making subjects like today, the discipline of submission, very difficult to teach. People turn off their ears as soon as they hear discipline or submission. That's understandable. When we've heard phrases such as, we're going to discipline you now, and you are punished, or the court needs to discipline, and you are placed in prison, or you are fined. Submission sounds like losing. Submission sounds like giving up, and we don't like losing. We don't like living on our knees. It sounds like not only taking a loss, but also unpleasant consequences that come from that loss. Once again, however, the Scripture turns these words around, and what would be negative in a secular context becomes positive in a spiritual one. I'm hoping by the end of the lesson, you'll be able to see how. Discipline means to bring into line. A disciple is a follower. To discipline is to help somebody fall into line. I've had parents say, we took our kids to the restaurant for the first time and it was a disaster. We're never doing that again. And my response to them is, no, you take them back. You teach them how, you're going to be embarrassed for the first 80 times, but it will get better. If you don't take them, you're not civilizing them. They have to be shown how to follow the lines. In Tanzania, one of the issues that I came across immediately was that stop signs, traffic lights, even which side of the road to drive on, or what's a road, all of these definitions did not exist. And therefore, is mass chaos. And there were a lot of traffic jams that didn't need to be there. Had there been a system in place that said, you stay over here, we'll stay over here, and this is the way we do things. And whenever I would explain this to the Tanzanians, they looked at me as if I was from Mars and might as well have been. And one of Epaphras said, I would love to come to the United States and drive. And I said, you will never drive in the United States. And he was going, really? And I said, really? If you ever do come to the States, we will make sure somebody else drives you. And we will assign a guard to make sure you don't drive. Because this is not discipline. We understand over here. Now, they have other forms of discipline. Please don't let me act like America's got it sorted and Tanzania doesn't. Every nation has areas where we're not disciplined. Many of you have certain disciplines already. You take time to read. You've set a time to exercise. You've set a time to watch our videos, perhaps. Or you have gardens that you tend at certain times. Since you're watching this or listening to a podcast, you have another discipline going on. You've decided to put this information in your head. And perhaps, if it is useful, to adjust your life accordingly. That's a positive thing. That's not punishment to be disciplined. One of the rules of the universe is pain now, pleasure later, pleasure now, pain later. It's not a karma thing. As C.S. Lewis would put it, exercise for him and for me, I'm very much with Jack on this, exercise is not pleasant. To me, exercise is boring. It's very hard to read while exercising unless you're on a treadmill. It's hard to get information in. However, if you don't exercise now, you lock up later. And so, pain now, pleasure later. Or, in reverse, my wife has been in Texas for a couple of weeks. She returns tomorrow. So I have a lot of work to do this afternoon. There's nothing keeping me from going out and getting 24 donuts and sitting there and eating them. That would be pleasure now. Pleasure. It would be pain later. Because now I'm going to have to deal with the sugar, the fat, the sedentary lifestyle. You see what I mean? And so discipline is to help us get to pleasure. The purpose of discipline is freedom. If you do stretches and walk every day, your discipline is freeing you from a host of problems that accrue when you spend too much time in a chair. If you learn the discipline of study and learn how to teach what you've learned, then you can teach without fear. We have Slido where you can ask questions live, and at the end of service, we pull up the questions. If there are any, I answer them. How can we do that? Well, because I'm not afraid. I've studied this. I've worked on it. That was discipline. There are other things I could have done. There are television shows I've never seen, movies I've never seen, there are places I've never been, but this discipline has given me freedom to do this. Disciplines are for the purpose of realizing a greater good, not just for the good of mankind, but for your own personal good. What freedom is gained when we learn the discipline of submission, however? This one's going to be odd for some of you to hear. Freedom from always having to be right. Happy Father's Day to our fathers. Fathers and mothers know this. If you have little boys, they know everything. And they will debate it incessantly. They do not get tired of it. And ladies, I hate to break this to you, they do not grow out of it. They merely go to sports radio and talk radio and continue doing it there. I get my hair cut at a place that shows sports channels all the time. And because I go during the daytime, it's not games. It's commenters saying what's going to happen in a game as if they know, or what happened in another game, or arguing about things. And it's all ephemera. In other words, tomorrow, none of what they said will matter. Not one thing. And yet people are absorbed by it. Wouldn't it be nice to have the freedom that you don't always have to be right? You ever seen a child throw a fit in a store? Screaming, demanding, maybe even falling on the floor. It's uncomfortable. And we hope that one day they will grow up, learn some self-control and some discipline, which means not always getting their way. Have you seen an adult lose it over something? You ever watch the news? 24/7 news channels? Yeah. They react the same way as the kid. But here's the fact, the universe is not here to serve us. And sometimes we will not get our way. So how are you going to deal with that? God created billions of people, and some of them are going to get in your way and prevent you from doing this or that you really wanted to do. How are you going to handle that? You are not the creator king of the universe. Therefore, you will not get your way many, many, many times. How are you going to handle that? We usually try to get around this by saying, well, we're not fighting for a candy bar at the store or the right-of-way on the interstate. What we want is a critical issue of right and wrong, and it is worth the fight. So that's how a lot of riots start. And that's how a lot of church fights start and why they continue. The average size of a church, Protestant or Catholic, in the United States runs less than 70. In fact, what that means is more of them are under 70 than larger than. If you want to take a look at the mean, which I don't want to go into all of the average versus mean, what it means is that most of those that are over 70 are around 80 or 90. They're not the megachurch. They're tiny, and they're withering. Why? Well, a lot of them have one or two people that run them, or one family that's run them for generations, and you can tell. I don't know who said it first, but my father quoted it to me often. He said, you can always tell the self-made man by the amateur handiwork. We are not designed to run our own lives. We need God, and we need submission. The fact is, most things in life are not major issues. Most things are not bigger than the command of Jesus Christ to love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself. If you find something bigger than that, you are given now permission to leap out there and demand your own way. But I don't think you're going to find something bigger than that, more powerful than that. Jesus started his public ministry with something we call the Sermon on the Mount, although he repeated it several times in different places, and Luke gives a version of it. We call that one the Sermon on a Level Place. In each, he calls us to change our view of other people. We're not given a host of rules about actions, but about attitudes. Instead of don't kill, it's don't hate. Instead of don't commit adultery, it's Don't go around lusting after people. One of the things I would do is I would teach men's groups and men's retreats is I would bring up, if you don't want men to lust after your daughters, don't lust after theirs. And you ought to see the way framing it that way hits some people. Yeah, we need to change our attitudes. The actions will follow. We are free now to not look upon other people as problems. There are times that because my wife understands what I mean, I'll call her and say, did you know it's International Get in Front of Patrick and Drive Slow Day? Now, I'm not wishing ill on anybody in front of, I'm not actively wishing ill on anybody in front of me, but it just seems that day God is sending a message to me through the universe that I'm not in charge of anything. Not a thing. I'm not in charge of when the pharmacy decides to take its lunch, which is always the wrong time. I'm not in charge of any of this. And God likes to give you subtle reminders of that. Do you remember the first time you got out of a chair and made a noise? You went, and then you went, oh no. Do you remember the first time you put on, let's say, a coat and your father's hands came out? You went, okay. You're not in charge. You can pause this video here, go look in a mirror. I'm going to tell you what you're going to find out. You peaked a while ago. You're not in charge. So perhaps submitting makes sense. And since we are free to care about others, we don't have to sit in a throne room in our own brain. We can care for others as Melania read to us. And by the way, she does not speak English. I think she did a fantastic job reading it. She speaks Swahili. She barely knows any English at all. Epaphras would translate for me. I'm so proud of her, and my heart is with them right now. I'll admit to some distraction this morning. Because of the chapter breaks, we often don't notice that after Paul goes through this whole thing about weep with those who weep, mourn with those who mourn, rejoice with those who rejoice, don't hurt people, live in peace with all people if it's possible with you. Because of chapter breaks, we often go, that was interesting, now chapter 13. No, it's a continuation. And he goes, submit to the authorities. I don't know what it is in Middle Tennessee, and we have some visitors here, so let me just warn you. For some reason, everybody is running radar right now. I think I was hit with radar 5 times coming from Spring Hill into Brentwood a couple of days ago by local police, the sheriffs, and by state. And I'm going, is there a financial crisis? What's going on right now? Or has there been some real issue with traffic on these roads? I didn't see a police car and go, oh no, because I learned a long time ago that God created cruise control on the 8th day for a reason. Said it. Don't worry about it. You don't need to worry about, where are the police? You don't have to buy radar detectors. You don't have to, no. Just submit and you don't have to worry. The fear isn't there. And we've all had those people that just zip in and out of traffic and run up on you and beep and the like, and then you come up on a traffic light and they're right in front of you. Didn't do a thing for them. So why don't you just back off on all of this? Submit to the ruling authorities. In fact, what he says is that will free you from fear. If you're not doing wrong, yes, that's fine. There are videos all over X and Instagram and the like of people being pulled over and going absolutely nuts. Here's an idea. Just comply. It might actually work. And you might find a friend. Probably not. But you're probably not going to get shot. And that's a good thing. If you don't know this, other countries, American police officers have weapons. If you're pulled over in Britain, it's such a pleasant experience, frankly. It's who's been a naughty boy, and, well, I've been naughty. And you do that for a while. How naughty have you been? Ever so naughty. And it's nice. Over here, it's out of the car. Anyway, Paul's not done. He brings it back to what I said a minute ago. Our task, Romans 13:10, our job is to love God and love each other. That's the job. Now, I don't care how you earn your money, within legal limits, obviously. I don't care how you earn your money. Your job is to love God and love others. And those others are going to be other. They're not going to be you. They're going to like different things. They're going to want different things. They're going to move at different speeds. Every year at Christmas, I wish that there is a course on how to walk in a crowded area so that people don't string out and kind of wonder. Years and years ago, I'm going to lose everybody under 50. There was a state-of-the-art toy. I never owned it because we were poor, where you just had these little figures of football characters, and you would line them up, and then you turn on, and the thing would vibrate, and they would move randomly. And maybe, to us, this was an Xbox. This is a PS12. This is something that was from the future. Now, when I see people in a mall, I think of that. Because we need blinkers. we need rules. We need discipline. We need lanes. But people are going to be other. And then we get to Romans 14. He's still on the same subject. And in fact, Romans 14, verse 1 to Romans 15, verse 7 is the longest sustained one topic that Paul hits in Romans, and arguably anywhere else. I would argue that 1 Corinthians has a longer one, but actually I wouldn't argue. I would just say that's what I think, and then I don't argue. I refuse all invitations to argue or debate, because I used to be an arguer and a debater, and I never brought anybody closer to Jesus by doing it, including me. So instead, nope, not going to do it. I understand what you say. I believe what I believe. You believe what you believe. And I believe we're both saved. So why fight about it? Why arrive at heaven, seething? He got in. Just enjoy. Just enjoy. But Romans chapter 14, verse 1, except the one whose faith is weak, without quarreling over disputable matters. Well, there goes your entertainment. He just killed talk radio, sports radio, and a whole lot of discussions of little boys in the back seats. How about verse 4? Who are you to judge someone else's servant? You're not God. They don't belong to you. They belong to God. To their own master, servants stand or fall. And here's the blessing, because right there you get some, okay, you're going to get yours eventually. No. And they will stand, for the Lord is able to make them stand. They're going to be okay with God too. Do you ever walk up to somebody who has several children and say, which one's your favorite? Now, they may have one, but they're not going to ever tell you that. I heard a comedian years ago, I think it was Brian Regan, who said, my wife and I have 2 wonderful kids and another one. If you're in a room right now with your family, do not point. We all know. God doesn't have a favorite kid. And they're his kids. We could go every verse here, but I'm skipping through like a rock on the top of a lake just to verse 10. Why then do you judge your brother or sister? Why do you treat them with contempt? For we will all stand before God's judgment seat. How about verse 13? Therefore, let us stop passing judgment on one another. Instead, make up your mind. There is discipline and submission. Make up your mind to do what? Well, don't put any stumbling block or obstacle in the way of a brother or sister. Some of the ways that we can avoid the stumbling block is by the discipline of silence. I don't know how many times people will say to me, I believe this is happening and this is what God's doing. And I think they're completely off. And I don't say a word. Why? Why would I? What's the point? All my life, every election cycle, I've had people walk up to me and going, this is the end times, isn't it? This is it. This is the end times. This is a sign of the end of the world. It's plain as day. And I'll just nod and smile, because what's the point? If you look at them and say everybody since Jesus' resurrection and ascension has thought it was the end times, that doesn't help them because they're going, but we know it's true. Okay. And I'm not going to go back to their house 20 years later and go, aha. Because the fact is, one of these days it's going to be over. And who knows, we may be living in our end times. The clothes you will be buried in are most likely already in your closet. How's that for an uplifting? Aren't you glad you're here? Happy Father's Day. Verse 19, let us therefore make every effort, discipline, to do what leads to peace, submission, and mutual edification. Make every effort to do what leads to peace. Have you ever written an email and then deleted it? If you haven't, you're the problem. Because a lot of times, I want to send something. And then I'll go, will this lead to peace? No. This will lead to return. And this will just bring it up more. Yesterday, for a reason I still cannot figure out, somebody behind me laid on their horn. I was being a good boy. I was behaving as if Cammie was in the car. I was doing right. And I still don't know why they did that. Now, part of me wanted to be a 6'7" muscular fellow that could then get out of the car, maybe with a badge too, and buddies. And anyway, I didn't spend that much time with it. Kind of did. And go have a discussion with the fellow. But the fact, none of this is going to lead to peace. I didn't beat back. I didn't make a hand signal. None of it's going to lead to peace. Let it go. Besides, this is Tennessee. They may have something in the car. In fact, I think it's almost required in Tennessee. Chapter 15, that's why the doctors don't spank babies when they're born in Tennessee. Kids probably already armed. In Romans 15, starting at verse 1, we who are strong ought to bear with the failings of the weak and not to please ourselves. Now, this one's weird, by the way, because there are a whole lot of folk that try to stand this on their heads and say, well, we're weak because what you do is offending us, so you need to stop. No, that makes you the strong person because everybody has to change their behavior for you. I ran a counseling clinic for 8 years. I don't counsel now, please. I don't have a license for it, far away from it. I can't hear you. Anyway, but I ran one, and there was one type of person I refused to treat. Those that were wrapped in self-pity. Because they were the most powerful person in any room they went into. And they would not lay down their power. Well, they would say they were the most miserable, and people don't understand me, and I'm not really... It was all so that when they walked into a room, everybody had to coalesce and change their behavior around them. And they don't want to give up their power. And until that person understands that they're playing a power game, Paul here is not going to let you get away with that. If you are strong, then you need to bear with the failings of those who are weak. Well, what about the person in self-pity? Nobody understands me. Well, then you ought to bear with their failings and accept it with a smile. Well, that's not the standard tactic. No, it isn't. But it's the Christian one. The discipline of submission. Each of us should please our neighbors for their good to build them up. I've had a lot of neighbors. Most of my neighbors, if I'm being honest, most of my neighbors have been stellar. Absolutely amazing. I've only had one or two in my entire life that caused an issue. One would let their trash blow into my yard. It was years ago, so don't be trying to figure it out. And every morning I would go out when there was trash. It wasn't an everyday thing. And I would pick it up and put it in mine. Because picking it up and throwing it back over the fence does not lead to peace and mutual edification. Doesn't hurt me to pick it up. Doesn't shorten my life. Doesn't cost me any money. I can move with this. Even Christ did not please himself. Well, that's obvious if you've ever read the Gospels. As it is written, the insults of those who insult you have fallen upon me. It's amazing. How about verses 5 through 7? May the God who gives endurance and encouragement, because you're going to need it, give you the same attitude of mind toward each other that Christ Jesus had, so that with one mind and one voice you may glorify the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. I would remind you that the attitude Jesus had toward others was to love them so much he died for them, even though he was guilty of nothing. And that, my friend, is submission. And we are called into that. Self-denial is not self-hatred. Jesus never said, pick up thy throne and follow me. He said, pick up a cross. He submitted to the will of his Father, then submitted to our needs, paid our debts. And in Philippians chapter 2, verses 1 through 8, we are told, have this mind in you, which was also in Christ Jesus, who, although being very form of God, did not consider that something to be grasped, but rather let go of it, and humbled himself as a man, even to the death on the cross. Have that mind in us. Self-denial is not self-hatred. I like various aspects of me, and I enjoy making me happy by doing things I like, visiting a guitar shop, eating donuts. Because I know when you look at me, you're thinking, what? With that buff, muscular body? How? Yes, I still indulge from time to time. I don't know why people are laughing in my small group. I'm sure you at home are taking me very seriously. We don't debase ourselves when we submit to others. It's a Father's Day. I'm aware of some people are not fathers, or they were fathers. There's separation, there's death. So we don't do Mother's Day sermons and Father's Day sermons. But let me just use something from family. Even if you don't have children of your own, perhaps you've interacted with them and you stack the blocks. What do? Knock them down. You build a little sandcastle. What do? Knock it down. That's their job. It's fine. We're submitting to them without going, hey, I was building something nice. We're the grown-ups, and grown-ups submit. Next week, we're going to talk about the discipline of service. In service, we act out our submission, capital letters, because of our high view of others. In 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verses 19 through 23, though I am free and belong to no one, I have made myself a slave to everyone, submission, to win as many as possible. Some of us need to have that phrase, to win as many as possible, written on the dashboard of our cars, on the inside of our purse and wallet, wherever we're going to see it a lot, maybe on our phones, wherever we're going to see it a lot. To the Jews, I became like a Jew to win the Jews. I got to tell you, when Cammie is out of town, a lot of you know I work with the local Chinese community in town. Long story about how that happened. It's all about a God thing. They're different. It's not just the language, people. The way things are done. And they love when Cammie's out of town because they'll say, you can come to dinner with us at night, because they know if Cammie's in town, I'm going to be with Cammie. And if I'm in town, I'm going to be with Cammie. That's the way we've made it to almost 46 years at the end of the month. We make each other a priority. But they'll say, and I'm not sure what's on the table. It's things that I don't normally eat, and it's not done the way that I would. But guess what? If they say do this, I do that. I don't go, well, that's not the way we did it in Scotland or in Ohio or over in Colorado. No. To the Jews, I become like a Jew. To those under the law, I became like one under the law, though I myself am not under the law. So when I go to a conservative church and they do conservative things, I do them too. Why not? In fact, I'll even ahead of time say, do you need me to wear a jacket or a tie or something? And rarely do they say yes. Normally, if people see me in a jacket or a tie, they're looking around for the dead person. That's about the only time it happens anymore. And no, I'm not going to wear one when I'm dead, because I'm going to be cremated, so you can have the clothes. Those of you that have been waiting for this bounty. To those not having the law, I became like one not having the law, though I'm not free from God's law, but I'm under Christ's law. So in other words, when I'm around happy people, I can be happy. When I'm around free people, I can be free. When I'm around people who are sad, I will be sad. Why? Because I'm submitting to win as many as possible. To the weak I became weak, to win the weak. I have become all things to all people, so that by all possible means I might save some. I do all of this for the sake of the gospel, that I may share in its blessings. What a beautiful passage. What an amazing passage. We are free to adapt, free to give way, to share what we have. We're not owned by our possessions. We're not owned by our will and desire. We can love. We can even love those who are unloved by the community. And that'll bring disapproval. One of the things that happened when we first started this, when people started going, well, you're going to teach this, aren't you? And you're not going to let these people in, are you? And the number of those emails I got was staggering and frankly a bit depressing. The fact is, we're not called to love those that the majority of our community love. We have been called to love all as being handmade creations, dearly loved by God Himself, our Father. They want to call every issue a major critical one that needs to be fought over, even at the cost of souls, peace of the community. No. But that does raise a question, and it's a legitimate question. Do we ever speak up? Do we ever fight back? Well, in Romans, you may not have noticed it, but near the end of chapter 12, it says, if it is possible, and as much as it lies with you, live in peace with all men. I'm so glad God didn't say, live in peace with all men, full stop. He gave two qualifiers. If it is possible, and as much as it lies with you. Let's take the second one first. Some of you may be able to take a lot more before you break than others. Well, you're wired that way. Doesn't make you spiritually superior. Just means God made you that way. Thank God for that. We need people like you. As much as it lies with you, and if it is possible, if a man breaks through my front door with an axe and starts heading toward me, it's probably not possible at that stage. There are going to be times where we must fight back. Most of the time, 99.99% of the time, we will live our lives never having to fight back physically, except for schoolyard silliness. We will fight back in other ways. When we see injustice, as I work with people in prisons, I see injustice. We will fight back. How do we fight back? By throwing rocks and by, blowing up stuff? No, there are mechanisms in place. Everything from the ballot box to open discussions with people, to writing letters to those in power, to speaking for those who have no voice. There are mechanisms in place there. We go through the process. We can appeal the grade we were given, or we can ask a group meeting to decide who's in the right on the issue. Even while doing all of this, however, we must remain gentle, peaceful, and submissive to the reality that other people are valuable too, that they are one-of-a-kind creations by our Father, and we are not on this planet to rule it or them. We are here to shine with the light of the one who told us to pick up a cross, submission, and follow Him. More next week.